Okay, hello to. Could you first of all introduce yourself to our readers?
Hi, I'm Emmanuel Servais. I'm a live producer on Warface for Europe and the US.
My name is Joshua Howard. I'm the executive producer for Warface at Crytek.
Okay, first question is always the same question to everyone. What is the technology behind your game? The engine, of course. I assume Cryengine 3?
That's right. Actually, we are a Cryengine game. But to say which Cryengine is a little bit difficult. One of the nice things about Warface is we've been evolving the engine over time, using the best parts, but also doing what we needed to make sure that it worked really well in the online space. So we're bits and parts of various engines really optimized for the kind of online game we are.
So can you go into a little bit into detail there? So what did you modify? What did you keep? What really is perfect for your game that the technology offers?
So Warface is a Cryengine game through and through, but because of the kind of game we are is a little different than previous Cryengine games, we've had to make some adjustments and use it a little bit differently. There are a few key examples of that. One off, which turned out to be really appropriate, was the Cryengine toolset does a fantastic job letting developers and artists and animators iterate very quickly. And iterating very quickly is a really incredibly critical part of building an online game. We have a lot of content to produce, and unlike a retail title where you produce it and ship it and you're done, we've got to be building content, new content all the time. So the Cryengine toolset is really well tuned to an environment where we have to keep the pipeline going, and it's been essentially up and running for 4 or 5 years. So that's been great. Another example of how we use the Cryengine in a way that's a little bit different is, while the latest Cryengine does have great DX11 support, because Warface is a free-to-play game, we make sure that Warface runs on as much hardware as possible, which means we're using the DX9 renderer so that we're running on 4 or 5-year-old PCs, even old video card hardware. So with a free-to-play game, you need to look great on as many machines as possible. So we've taken the Cryengine and made some adjustments and optimizations to it to really apply to the specific game Warface needs to be.
Mm-hmm. So you don't use DX11, that's an interesting point. So, but anyway, so DX11 is a very advanced API. Yeah. So what do you like with the API, even if you can't use it or use it yet, maybe in further time?
Yeah, so from the developers to my artists are really excited about what we're going to be able to do with some of the tessellation. So they've done sample screens that say, you know, look, here's one version and here's with tessellation. In fact, even at this show, I've had people come up and study the screen very carefully and say, there's no tessellation. You're right, there's no tessellation today because we're still DX9. But it's an example of one of the, what sounds sort of like a technical detail, but that my artists and my designers are really excited about using. We do see DX9 as something that Warface might adopt in the future. It's just a matter of finding the right time. When do enough people have DX9, DX11 quality hardware that we can flip over for a free-to-play game?
Mm-hmm. So how does the consoles, the new or the next console generation comes into play? Will the game sometime we play on consoles as well?
Well, Warface is today a PC game. It's certainly something we've thought about to bring Warface to the console. In part because the power of the new consoles is so incredible, we think that we can really drive the vision of Warface even more. The great visuals, given the new console capabilities and what the Cryengine can do on them, we think Warface would be absolutely gorgeous. Gameplay-wise, we think it's also a really good fit. But even, frankly, some of the existing generation of consoles, they're powerful enough machines to run the kind of engine that we're using with Cryengine on a free-to-play space. So Warface on console doesn't sound that crazy. It's not something we're talking about today, but it might be something we talk about later.
And then it requires DX11, of course, so then you have to migrate to that API, or haven't you?
Oh, yeah, I think you might be able to just still use the same renderer system. It would obviously look a bit different than, say, Crysis 3 because it's using this kind of technology. But Warface being a scalable thing, it's more of a simple base, I think, more than, you know, it's a flavor of the game. It's the way it looks. So I think it doesn't necessarily mean it will be upgraded.
The challenge for Crytek is we want the games to look as good as they possibly can. And so there's definitely the tension of, if we were to do a console version or even continue to grow the PC version, we would definitely want to be looking at how we could adopt DX11. But that's intention in making sure that the game runs on as much hardware as possible. So DX11 is one of those technologies that we're watching carefully. As an engine business, we're definitely in tune with it and will continue to exploit it. Warface itself may delay a little bit when we pick it up to make sure that most of our users are ready for it.
the Cryengine, I think Cryengine 3, I say, comes with its own physics tools. So how do you have to modify them because you have a multiplayer game?
So as I understand it, the Cryengine actually does a fine job with the physics. And really the modifications that we had to make had less to do with that and more to do with how that operated in a much larger online environment. So Warface can have up to 16 players playing in a PvP match, for example. And while the core engine does most of the job there were things that we've done to make sure that the game is extra resilient in handling some of the latency issues we sometimes see on the internet. So while super low latency is always great, the engine's been tuned and tweaked for environments where maybe the latency can pop up a little bit without affecting gameplay as much as possible.
Crytek's engine is well known for its good multi-core support. So does that especially help you while developing a multiplayer part or a multiplayer game?
That's the same thing again, right? So multi-cores are something that we in Europe or US might be able to get easily, but because it's a game that we have published in multiple territories, we're trying to get the hardware, specs and the limitations that we have in all these territories and try to get what is the most common one and try to go for that and then expand on top of what is already available. So I think multi-cores, although we use them and we obviously research and we make sure that everything works well, is not necessarily something we could just put every effort into because of the other territories. So it's kind of I guess you raise the plateau for all the regions, otherwise it just doesn't work as well. I mean, as a game, it needs to be available where we can, so everywhere.
So multi-cores are another example, as Emmanuel said, where we've got people in the organization who see, here's what we could do if we were to really fully exploit this, and it's quite exciting. But as a free-to-play game, we need to run on a much wider array of hardware. So we do make use of it while it's there, but we are not nearly as optimized as if that were our minimum spec. So it's constant tension between using the latest and greatest, but also making sure the game is playable by as many people as possible.
And you personally, what do you prefer, a console or the PC? So are you a PC fan or are you a fan of the consoles? To be honest.
I'm a fan of games. I guess a few years ago I would have said I was playing a heck of a lot more console games, but over the last several years I've seen a number of PC games and basically my console doesn't get turned on too much these days. So I think it's fair to say in my life it's sort of been up and down and up and down. I've clearly got both, and I'm really excited that today I'm gaming on more platforms than I ever was before. Crytek is excited to be thinking about how we could be on multiple of those platforms, not just the console, not just the PC, but even some of the other form factors. So to me, it isn't so much about which one of them is best, as much as each of them are good at certain things, and as Crytek, we want to be there with an engine, with a tool set, to really allow developers to maximize them.
And one last question. Once again, a more personal opinion. What do you think about the capabilities, the technical capabilities of the new console hardware, especially the new consoles?
Why don't you start, Emmanuel?
Well, I think, the new availabilities, or rather all engines that will be adapted to the new generations. I mean, Cryengine being also enabled for the next generations, like what you can actually pull off in terms of graphics and all the fine details and the way that the memory would work and all that. It's really allowing you to push things much further. And what I'm really excited about is what Crytek, with Rise and some of the other titles will end up doing, and how can we push it even further as every developer is trying to get it, right? And I think in 4 years' time, the game landscape is going to change so much that there will be so many new emergent things coming up. I think that's what is really interesting for me. I mean, but the spec themselves, PC is always going to catch up, obviously. It's always going to be a bit on top, but it's exciting. This is going to push things forward.
When we launched the last generation, I remember thinking, I don't know how graphics are going to get better. This is just so incredible, and it was so real, and it was so amazing. And part of what I love about this industry is how we're reinventing it on all levels all the time. So it's fantastic as a content provider, as a group who is all about building a great game service, to see that on the other side there are people who are constantly pushing the hardware to do more and more and more. And then that there are great people like the Cryengine folks who are giving me the ability to tap that engine more and more. So I look at the current generation of what's coming next, and I'm absolutely blown away by what we're doing. And I feel like this is the point where it's as good as it's going to get. And yet I know that probably several years from now I'm going to be wrong again. So I love that this industry keeps surprising all of us. Exactly. And I think that's super exciting for us as developers, for players. It's exciting.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.